thank you everyone that you're sharing this space with us. Jemand braucht whisper translation auf Deutsch, weil wir reden am meisten auf Englisch. Wenn jemand braucht whisper translation auf Deutsch, wir können auch das arrangieren. Wahrscheinlich nicht. So I'm Farzada. I'm basically moderating this panel on behalf of Shahnaz Museum. And I'm so happy that we have two amazing guests from Pakistan and one very, very nice guest from Copenhagen, Saadat. And then this discussion tonight basically cover different corner of politics of trans-activism, and with reflection on privileges and access and transnational movements and lots of things. And first I would ask the guests to introduce themselves for a short round, and then we start with some questions, and afterward we open the panel with a dialogue with our fantastic audience that are here. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Hi. I'm Neeli Rana from Pakistan. I'm social worker activist. My living Lahore, my city. मैं अपनी कम्युनिटी के लिए काम जब स्टार्ट किया तकरीबन मुझे 20 साल हो गए.
I work for my community since 20 years in Lahore.
काफ़ी ज़्यादा प्रॉब्लम, काफ़ी मसले हो रहे थे क्योंकि काफ़ी वायलेंस के केसेस आ रहे थे.
We faced a lot of problems, a lot of violence cases.
हम लोग फंक्शंस करती थी डांस के शादियों पे लोगों की.
We used to dance on weddings of people.
तो उन दिनों में कुछ केस ऐसे हुए मसले के हम एक फंक्शन पे गई तो वहाँ पे उन्होंने शराब पी थी और हमें पूरी रात को मारते रहे थे, शदत करते रहे.
At one of the weddings, a case happened when the people were drunk. Men were drunk and they started beating us and they tortured us for the whole night.
और हमने सुबह पुलिस स्टेशन में जाकर कंप्लेन लिखवाने की कोशिश की तो उन्होंने हमें आगे से गाली निकाली तो था पुलिस स्टेशन से बाहर निकाल दिया, कहने के इनको लटाओ और इनको बार जूते मारो. तो ये ऐसे लोग हैं खराब.
And in the morning when we went to the police and we tried to file a case against these people, the police tortured us and treated us in a very bad way. They also said that we are not respectable people and we should be beaten even more because we are doing wrong things.
तो ऐसी चीजें और लोगों के साथ हमारी कम्युनिटी के साथ भी हो रही थी. तो हमारे साथ खुद भी प्रैक्टिकल उस प्रोसेस से हम लोग गुजरे. तो ये चीजें जब हो रही थी तो बड़ी तकलीफ देती.
We went through a lot of pain when these things happened to us and also to other people in our community.
और फिर उसके बाद एक कुछ अर्सा गुजरा तो उसके बाद फिर हम एक फंक्शन पे थे लाहौर में. तो हमें वहाँ पे भी तशद्दुद का निशाना जब बनाया जा रहा था तो मैं तकरीबन 24 फुट की ऊंचाई पे लटक गई नीचे और मैं गिरी, मेरे पाँव की हड्डी टूट गई.
At another event, after a while, there was again a similar situation where we were being tortured from men, and then I climbed up to a 24 feet high wall and wanted to jump down. I was hanging there from the roof.
तो फिर जब मैं उन दिनों में एक 6 माह लेटी रही मतलब घर पे उसकी रेस्ट क्योंकि मैं चल नहीं सकती, तो उन दिनों में ही मैंने सोचा कि हम कितनी देर लोगों का मतलब जुल्म सहते रहेंगे, हमें लड़ने की ज़रूरत है.
I fell from the roof and broke my legs. She broke my legs, foot, and I was laying in the hospital for 6 months. And in this time, I started thinking about we have to do something against it, and how long are we gonna tolerate this violence against us?
तो तब फिर जब चीज़ें मैं ठीक हुई तो फिर मैंने लोगों से पूछना शुरू किया, कुछ वकीलों से कुछ राय लेती थी कि किस तरह क्या कानून है, क्या चीज़ें, क्योंकि मैं पढ़ नहीं सकती, तो इस वजह से लोगों से पूछ के मैंने छोटी-मोटी चीज़ों का काम स्टार्ट कर दिया, क्योंकि मैं पुलिस बाद में कुछ अर्सा पुलिस स्टेशन के पास से गुजरती थी तो मुझे डर लगता था।
When my health got better, I started asking people around me, lawyers around me, what can I do to talk against this, to do something against this violence, and because I also had a lot of trauma and was scared of passing by police stations for a long time. So I asked different people for help to tell me how to do something against it.
और फिर ऐसा मैंने कुछ लोगों को साथ में कम्युनिटी के लोगों से बात की जिनके साथ वायलेंस हो रही थी और जिनके साथ हो चुके थे, तो उनको फिर इकट्ठा किया और मैंने बात की कि हम इसके खिलाफ लड़ेंगे।
I started gathering people in the community who have been facing violence or who had faced violence in the past, and we started talking in the group about what to do.
तो फिर एक कैंपेन चली और अभी एक मतलब हमारी टीम बन गई, उसके बाद बहुत सारे मर्डरों के केस हमने हैंडल किए, क्योंकि हम पढ़ नहीं सकते थे मगर हम लड़ सकते हैं, ताकत बन गई, हमारी मजबूत एक टीम बन गई।
We made a team out of this group, and we started gathering murder cases and rape cases, and we started. We are not educated people, but we had enough power to fight against. We gathered enough power to fight against this violence, and we started making these violent murder cases public.
और कैसे पता ही नहीं चला कि कितने साल कैसे गुजर गए काम करते करते, और काफी तो खैर पता ही नहीं चलता कि 20 साल कैसे गुजरे हैं और इतना चीजें करते हुए, और काफी लोगों की हमने अपनी कम्युनिटी की मतलब उनको ताकतवर भी बनाया कि अपने लिए लड़ सके।
Now it's been 20 years, and I don't know how these 20 years passed, that we are fighting against these crime against our community in Pakistan, and now we are power for our community, and we are all together trying to fight.
क्योंकि पहले कुछ शहरों में होता था कि हम पुलिस स्टेशन में कंप्लेन, जिस तरह हो हमारा किसी मतलब मसला हुआ तो हम कंप्लेन लिखेंगे, किसी ने कंप्लेन नहीं लिखी, तो अब पुलिस स्टेशनों में कुछ बड़े शहरों में जब जाती हैं तो कंप्लेन खैर लिखी जाती है किसी न किसी तरीके से।
Now the difference is the change which has come is that before we went to the police and they never filed our complaints, but now in bigger cities we can go to some police stations and they do file our complaints, and throughout the activism we did, now it's possible to at least file the complaints in the police.
और activism एक ऐसी चीज़ है, ये एक बहुत लंबा रास्ता है, ना खत्म होने वाला, तो इसमें बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं जो हमने इसमें शायद हमारे पास टाइम इतना नहीं है कि हम इतना लंबा चौड़ा बताएंगे कि चीज़ तो नहीं बता सकते।
Activism is a very long process which is still going, but right now probably we don't have so much time to talk about everything what we do. Yeah.
और इसी तरह हमने काफ़ी चीज़ें की हैं, जिसमें एक अक्स भी है, अक्स फिल्म फेस्टिवल। मुझे 2012 में जब मैं कोपेनहेगन आई तो मेरी सदात से पहले ही मुलाकात हो चुकी थी, डॉक्यूमेंट्री कर बना रहे थे।
During this activism process, also Aks started, I met Saadat in 2012 in Copenhagen when he was making he was making a film, a documentary about trans people in Pakistan.
और मैंने जब फेस्टिवल देखा और वहाँ पे डॉक्यूमेंट्री देखी तो मैंने कहा कि पाकिस्तान में ऐसी चीज़ क्यों नहीं हो सकती। फिर हम लोगों ने बैठे, इन्होंने कहा कि अगर आप लोग चाहे कम्युनिटी चाहे तो ज़रूर करेंगे। तो फिर उसके बाद हमने प्लान किया तो 2014 से हमने अक्स जो है ना पाकिस्तान में स्टार्ट किया।
And I asked myself why this kind of festival and these documentaries cannot be shown in Pakistan. Talked to Saadat about it, and he said, yes, if you want it, then we can start it in Pakistan as well. And after some time of planning, in 2014, they started Aks Film Festival in Pakistan as well.
और पाकिस्तान में बहुत सारे अभी हमारे पास काफ़ी शहर हो चुके हैं जिस तरह हम लोग चाहते हैं कि मज़ीद उसको डिफरेंट और पाकिस्तान के पूरे कंप्लीट ज़्यादातर शहरों में उनको कम्युनिटी को जो है ना अवेयर कर सकें, सिखाएं। मेरा आगे नेक्स्ट है कि मज़ीद दूसरे शहरों में और शहरों में उसको अक्स को लेके जाएं।
Meanwhile, it's happening in different cities in Pakistan. We are showing these documentaries in also in smaller cities and more cities, and my plan is to bring this film festival into even more cities in Pakistan to make people aware of the problems we have.
जिस तरह भी खुशी हो रही है बार्लिन में हमारा जो पहले हमने फेस्टिवल कर चुके हैं और यहाँ पे हमने उनका वो सारा रिपीट एक चीज़ की है, तो ये भी खूबसूरत है। हमारी जो पुरानी यादें मतलब वो एक बहुत अच्छी चीज़ है।
I feel very happy about this exhibition in Berlin, that now this exhibition is showing what we did in the past, and it brings upon nice memories, and it feels very beautiful to have this exhibition happening here in Berlin as well.
Thank you. Farzada, Aks Museum. Thanks to invite के मतलब हमें बुलाने का यहाँ बहुत शुक्रिया, और हम लोग कुछ बातें सीख सकते हैं, सिखा भी सकते हैं जो हमने सीखा है।
Thank you to Farzada, to Aks Film Festival, to the museum for inviting me here, and we can learn from you, and you can learn from us what we have done already, so we can learn from each other.
Thanks.
Now the flow is like this. Introduce yourself and also a little bit reflect on the activism work that you're doing at the same time. I've got two questions.
I'm Munir, and yeah, I'm one of the persons who organize Aks Festival in Pakistan, and the main idea behind Aks Festival is to create a platform for the minorities or people who are marginalized, a safer space where we can see films and also reflect on our lives through talks and art. The festival, as Neeli said, is all her work. I just like try to curate films for that, and we've been doing it in Pakistan since 2014. And apart from doing it in Pakistan, there's also a lot of marginalization in Europe. So we do festival in Copenhagen and also in Manchester. And we try to always seek into new places to go and organize events and just similar to this one, just to create visibility through films, art, or dialects. So that's what I do, and still working? Yes. Okay. All right. Anyways, don't echo anymore. Yeah. So yeah, about activism, I don't know if I should call myself activism because this is something I've been doing through the Main Street Festival in Copenhagen as a programmer, and then I had a little skill of programming films, so I kind of contribute whatever I can or however I can do through this festival. So yeah, that's what I do so far.
And thanks, Saadat. I come back to this this skill of you. from Copenhagen for Pakistan and beyond, and Manchester and everything. Just keep it space to type something like that.
Hi, and Assalamualaikum. My name is Mehlab. I'm also from Lahore, Pakistan, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. I always get very like an existential crisis whenever I have to introduce myself. Like which categories do I embody? I am a researcher. I am an educator, I guess. I do community organizing work. Some people call me an activist. I hate that word. But I guess in terms of the kind of developments that are happening in Pakistan regarding transgender rights, I've been able to contribute whatever I can through whatever means are possible to me. But and I'm learning a lot, especially from my mentor, Neeli, Rana, Saadat. Other than that, I'm also I basically work on issues, cultural politics of gender and sexuality in Pakistan broadly, but also on seeing how marginalized communities interact with the law, and in that regard, I have lately been working on the kind of legal and policy frameworks that exist in Pakistan regarding protection of transgender communities. So recently, the Transgender Protection Bill was passed in Pakistan. I helped draft that. And along with people like Neeli, we're also working on a lot of other things regarding making departmental policies in Pakistan trans-inclusive. So that's what I do. I once again, it's like I said, it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope that through our discussion we all learn something from each other. And thank you to the Schultz Museum and to the Good Institute for making this possible, and Saadat for helping organize and for bringing us here. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. In the second round, I will go a little bit deeper of the same topic that they opened. What I would like to ask you, Neeli, you were working for 20 years and you already explained a little bit about the violence and things that you're doing. And I would like to ask you specifically about community work that you're doing, about putting people together and doing lots of things to build a community, and also network of your community with other people, other different contexts, within Farzada community, the different cities, how you make
कि आप अपने जो पिछले 20 साल से एक्टिविज्म कर रही हैं उसके बारे में काफ़ी बात की, लेकिन वो पूछना चाह रही कि आपको कम्युनिटी वर्क करती हैं, अपनी कम्युनिटी के बारे में बताएं कि कहाँ अपने लोगों के साथ क्या काम करती हैं और आपके अपनी कम्युनिटी का दूसरी कम्युनिटी और तरह की कम्युनिटी से कैसे नेटवर्किंग है उनका साथ कर रहा है.
And then how do you use tradition of Farzada to maintain this community?
और वो आप ख्वाजा सरा का गुरुचेला जो ट्रेडिशन है उसको कैसे इस्तेमाल करते हैं इस कम्युनिटी को कायम रखने के लिए.
थोड़ा सा ये बताइए पॉइंट करें.
अच्छा, बेसिकल तो एक चीज़ है कि एक जो कल्चर है जो हमारा कम्युनिटी का एक स्ट्रॉन्ग एक चेन है.
The culture of our community is a strong chain.
एक सबसे पहले तो एक रिश्ता बनता है गुरु और चेले का.
At the very beginning, we build a relationship of guru and chela.
क्योंकि उसमें हमारी एक रस्म होती है, उसको चटाई बोलते हैं. अगर हम जिस तरह पाकिस्तान में 125 देते हैं तो वो गुरु को देती है तो उसकी चेला होती है.
We have a custom of a ritual of making a guru. Guru is someone who is like, I would say in English, someone a leader, and chela is a person, a student.
No leaders.
Master and
Success.
master and
मतलब father mother.
Okay, it's also like father, mother.
Parent to the child. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So
And the tradition is that we give the child gives 125 rupees to the guru, and then they say, "I'm your chela."
हाँ एक ये रस्म होती है मतलब एक और मतलब जो हमारी चीज स्टार्ट हुई थी उसमें दुपट्टे की भी रस्म होती है कि दुपट्टा डालती है तो उसमें भी जिस तरह बधाई का हमारा कल्चर है कि जहाँ से स्टार्ट होगा कि हम लोग किसी के घर बच्चा पैदा होगा शादी होगी तो हम वहाँ से बधाई लेने जाएंगे एक टोली की शक्ल में.
There is another custom of giving a dupatta. This is a dupatta, a shawl, to the guru, and giving this means also they build a relationship. In Pakistan, it's called vadai, this tradition of giving dupatta, and it also happens when you get married or when a child is born, that dupatta is given to the person and a new relationship starts.
मतलब रिश्ते हमारे बनते हैं तो उसमें एक मतलब जिस तरह लोगों के बच्चे होते हैं एक रिश्ता होता है उसी तरह हमारा रिश्ता भी हमारे गुरुओं के साथ उसी में बहन भाई सारे रिश्ते वहाँ पे मिलते हैं.
Like families
sister, brother, father, mother
get children and make relationships through the children and their brothers and sisters and fathers. We make through these customs our own families and relationship of sisters, brothers, or parents starts through these customs.
अगर किसी को कोई भी प्रॉब्लम होता है तो वो आपस में शेयर करती हैं अगर कोई मुसीबत में होती है तो सब इकट्ठी होती हैं वहाँ पे. ये इसकी खूबसूरती है.
The beautiful thing about it is that whenever someone has a problem, we share it with our family and we talk about these problems as a family with each other.
और जो चटाई है वो जो बड़े मतलब बुजुर्ग हमारे मतलब एजेड गुरु होते हैं वो जो 125 है वो उनमें तकसीम होती है मतलब कम्युनिटी की चीज कम्युनिटी के अंदर होती है मतलब एक इंसान उसको नहीं ले सकता वो दूसरों में तकसीम कर देते हैं.
This 125 rupees, they don't stay with this guru. This 125 is distributed among all the gurus of the community. As a respect, they're also called Chaudhry. And it's a like custom of distributing this money between the gurus, so everyone is accepted as a guru.
क्योंकि वो गवाह होते हैं ये इसकी चेता है.
Because then they are the witnesses of this fact that this person is now chela of this guru. You are one of the guru in your community, no? Yes.
तो इसी तरह मतलब बहुत सारी रस्में हैं अगर किसी की डेथ होती है किसी के गुरु की तो मतलब उसी तरह उनके चेले वो जिस तरह बच्चे करते हैं मतलब हमारे पाकिस्तान का कल्चर है कि उनका वो सारी रस्में जो मतलब मरने के बाद वो सारी उनकी चेलों की जिम्मेदारी होती है.
For example, when a guru dies, then it's the responsibility of all the chelas to do the the ceremony and organize all the money and do everything for the
funeral.
For the funeral, exactly. To sustain the country. The answer
अब जिस तरह किसी को कोई प्रॉब्लम होता है कि मैंने लाहौर से काम शुरू किया तो वो फॉर एग्जांपल किसी के साथ कोई प्रॉब्लम मसला हो गया उन्होंने मुझे कॉल की है और मैंने कुछ टीम मतलब जिस तरह हमने डिज़ाइन की सब में मिलके अगर मैं वहाँ मौजूद नहीं तो मैं दूसरे लोगों को कहूँगी ये मसला है पुलिस स्टेशन या दूसरा किसी के साथ वायलेंस हुआ किसी का रेप हुआ या किसी का मर्डर हुआ अगर मैं लाहौर में तो खुद जाऊँगी साथ में अपनी टीम जाएगी अगर हम लोग डिवाइड है किसी और शहर में तो डिवाइड हो जाएंगे.
Now she's talking about her role of support in the community. When something happens, that someone is facing violence, someone is being raped, or any big problems happen, they call me, and then if I'm in Lahore, I would go there myself and try to protect the person and go to police. And if I'm not there, we have a team of gurus who we contact, and we are also connected with gurus in different cities. So even if I get a call from other cities, I would contact the other gurus in the city, and we would go there and see what has happened.
अगर वो हमारी चेला भी नहीं है तो एज अ कम्युनिटी मेंबर्स हम तो काम करें ना अपने लोगों के लिए, तो हमने तो वहाँ जाना है। जिस तरह हम लोग कुछ सिटीज़ हैं जहाँ जा सकते हैं, अगर हमारे पास कुछ मतलब फंडाइज मतलब पैसे हैं, तो अगर हमारे पास नहीं है तो हम कोऑर्डिनेट करते हैं फ़ोन के ऊपर, टेलीफोन के ऊपर कि पुलिस स्टेशन में जाएं, तो वहाँ पे हमारे किसी ऑफिसर से बात करें, मसला हुआ है, उस सूरत में भी हम लोग इस तरह से कम्युनिटी को जो है ना वेट कर रहे हैं।
Even if someone is not my Gina, still people call me. People from community member, they call me when they have a problem, and if I have, or if we have financial finances, enough money to go to the city and support the person, we go, and if we don't, we coordinate on telephone people in that city that they go to police, and then some police officer talk to me or other people from my team so we can try to solve the matter.
आज जब जिस तरह मैं अभी यहाँ पे हूँ, अगर कोई बाद में कोई प्रॉब्लम होता है तो पीछे लोग तैयार होने चाहिए उस चीज़ को हैंडल करने के लिए।
One of my job is also to prepare people for this support social work within the community. For example, now I'm here, and if something will happen in Lahore or in Pakistan somewhere, there are people who are trained to react to situations which trans community face there.
कुछ चीज़ों की तो हम प्लान करते हैं, कुछ चीज़ें तुरंत मतलब फौरी को मसला होगा तो फौरी वो उसका फौरी मतलब निकलते ही प्लान, कुछ हम लोग लिख के नहीं कर सकते, हम लोग बोल के या दिमाग से वो सारे इकट्ठा करके तो इस तरह से हमारी कुछ प्लानिंग होती है।
Some matters, some things we plan how to solve them. The other things are more like in crisis work. Things happen and we have to react to it spontaneously and find a solution to this problem together in a spontaneous way.
जिस तरह कई मसले होते हैं कि वो नहीं सुन रहे होते, गवर्नमेंट नहीं सुनती है पुलिस, फिर हम लोग प्लान करके कि प्रोटेस्ट के जरिए हम लोग सड़क पे आएंगे, उसमें शोर करके तो उस तरह हम लोग सारे कुछ कम्युनिटी मेंबर्स को करते हैं 1000, 2000 या 500 इस तरह से, तो फिर इकट्ठा करके प्रोटेस्ट की शक्ल में फिर चीज़ में बेची जाती है। इस तरह भी हम लोगों ने चीज़ें जो है की भी और कर भी गई, मतलब हाँ लोग कम्युनिटी मेंबर्स।
Sometimes when police or the government officials they don't react to a situation of violence, then we plan to do protests. We get together about 500, 1,000, 2,000 people, however is possible, and then we do planned protests and invite media and bring this issue to the public.
जिस तरह अभी ये मार्च में इसी साल में तो बैगिंग जो कम्युनिटी करती है उनके लिए गवर्नमेंट ने कोई प्लान नहीं किया जॉब का, तो अगर वो बैगिंग करी थी तो उनको पकड़ के वो जेलों में डाल रहे थे, तो उसके अगेंस्ट हमने वो प्रोटेस्ट किया तो वो चीज़ को मतलब रोका।
There is a part of community who has to beg on the streets, and it is there was no help from the government to find jobs for these people, so they had to beg to survive. And when police started raiding against beggars, and they catched people and put them in jail for begging, which was a very unfair thing to do from the government. And we gathered people from community and we protested against it, and then we stopped this action of putting our community in jail for begging, because there is no other way of earning money.
क्योंकि अलग-अलग तरीके हैं चीज़ों को मतलब देखना होता है कि ये मसला कैसे हल होगा और ये इसका तरीका क्या होगा, तो फिर वो सारी मतलब एक दूसरे से राय लेके बात करके तो फिर वो इस तरह से चीज़ को हमने डिजाइन करके करना होता है।
There are different ways to solve different kinds of problem. There is one sentence which you said before, I will just say translate it now, that because we cannot write or read. Our power is to talk, to get together and to use our mind and inner energies to solve a problem. And each matter would be discussed in a community, and a solution will be found within the community if we go public with it, or if we go just to police with it, or if we go to rich people with it. And there are different ways to solve different matters.
Thank you, Neeli, for this elaborate answer of basically also just showing the case of alternative family and community that actually, to one understanding, is even enforced to be accepted by somehow state violence, police. Somehow they have to accept it in some sense because you're strong. And somehow I have a feeling that Mehlab can also kind of complete this part. Yeah, just a little bit, and then we back to the.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things here that when it comes to what is happening regarding Pakistan activism, well, actually let's define the terms first, because Pakistan is a local, maybe like indigenous identity, which we anthropologists tend to call a third gender identity. But it's actually, I would say, it's a gendered identity, and it's actually way more than that. It's a tradition, it's a community, it's a kind of like a kinship system that is local to South Asia. That is often mistranslated as transgender. I say mistranslated because that is how the rest of the world sees us, sees the Pakistan, right? When in fact, Pakistan is actually way more than that. It goes beyond that, complicates that in a lot of ways. Pakistan activism kind of, you can say, actually like kind of a movement now, is relatively recent in some ways. Recent in the sense of how it has been read as activism more recently, but some things that actually go far beyond, maybe like even hundreds of years ago, I would say. The kind of resistance that the community has done over and kind of done to its own traditions. But in 2009, there was a case of police brutality at a wedding event where some Farzada were dancing and some other people were arrested from that particular event, and they were tortured by the police. The case got a lot of attention in the media, and at that time there was kind of like an environment of judicial activism in Pakistan. This was after the Musharraf dictatorship. So the courts were really active. So the Supreme Court kind of like took notice, as well as there was a lawyer who called himself Aslam Kaki. So who kind of called himself like an Islamic jurist and a social worker. He took the case to the Supreme Court and in his own problematic ways trying to get some sort of recognition for the community. Back then, the kind of in the law, the language that was used for the community was she-male. The idea that has been this has been really criticized since then. But that kind of like started this process where the community started interacting with the state. I say interaction because the community has always had a very antagonistic relationship with the state, and especially, for instance, when even the Supreme Court ruling came, there was a lot of nervousness, there was a lot of anxiety in the community, and it was not taken very positively. And I recently kind of found out that there were these huge congregations of the Pakistan of the different community who thought that the Supreme Court is, because the Supreme Court is talking about them, is for and a crackdown is imminent. So they were actually trying to find ways to resist that. So, which makes an important comment because oftentimes when recognition is done by state bodies, it is not done on the terms of the community. So when the Supreme Court, these judges are sitting and with their own kind of understanding that they were trying to impose on the community, so the community was actually finding ways to resist that. Since then, there have been a lot of developments within the law that have that kind of have, I guess, complicated the idea of recognition in Pakistan. What is also important to acknowledge here is that when we talk about community organizing, about activism, and the kind of work that is happening, it is very much rooted in our local, very specific context, right? In other words, everything that we have very elaborately elaborated upon. The history of the community goes back to several, I would say thousands of years actually, but and the traditions and the customs that are very specific to the community, that give the identity to the community, are very much intimately linked to the idea of how the community does activism, right? So, which I would say is very different from the way transgender activism is understood here or globally. And it also extends to the issues that are being addressed. So, for instance, there's a tendency, especially when the media talks about what is happening regarding transgender rights in Pakistan, they tend to frame the issues in a particular language that is very specific to here, like the idea of recognition, of having your gender recognized by the state, or sometimes even a very medicalized understanding of gender. Actually, in Pakistan, things are actually very different, right? So, I mean, the communities actually, even if they are talking about these very issues, they're talking about it in a very different way. So, especially when we were working on this bill recently as well, there was a tendency to, especially because of the kind of international pressure or whatever was going on at that time, to frame the law in a language that is not exactly very local to us, and the issues themselves were, so then people like Neeli kind of intervened in there, and they were like, okay, you want to talk about identity and whatever the kind of regulation that you're trying to impose on us, but also talk about shelter homes, and the kind of violence we face from the police, the kind of physical, mental, sexual violence we face in everyday lives. And there was actually, at least I saw it myself, they were just blank stares in their face, like, what? Like, they have no clue, right? So, the way Pakistan community is...
Can you clarify, what was compared to just identity politics, you mean? The Pakistan community was asking for protection in the community rather than... I just want you to clarify was the court proceeding?
So, the court proceedings were back in 2009 and went until 2012, but more recently the bill was presented in the parliament. What I'm trying to comment on here is that yes, again I won't call it specifically identity politics, but the idea is kind of similar. So what I've seen is that when people tend to talk about transgender rights, and especially when it comes to international advocacy, the idea is to push for these kind of this individualized framework of rights, right? But from what I've seen in my own experience, as a researcher as well, the community, the way they are organizing on the ground, the grassroots work, the demands are very different, right? So Neeli has been talking about police brutality for most of her life, and because she has faced that kind of police brutality her entire life. She's been talking about how the laws have been misused, the colonial laws that have been misused are being regularly misused, but somehow that never becomes part of the conversation, because transgender rights, seen in that individualized rights framework, in the sense of like, oh, this person needs to have this right, which is very important, but it tends to deflect from that kind of like the communal demands that are affecting mostly working class Palestinian communities, right? So that's again something that I wanted to, I guess, sort of clarify or complicate that, when we talk about activism and policy activism.
लोग तो काफी जगह पे इस्तेमाल है कि वो वाला किसी कोई भरा देना भी जानी भी तेरा बॉयफ्रेंड है
I just want to add something here also, about that Mehlab talk about rights. Somehow I remember that in March when I was in Pakistan, I was talking about this. Also, about right is also concept of right requires some sort of citizenship also to that land, and technically there are lots of people all around the world are refugees and they don't have access to this concept of right as so-called citizen embodied. So it's very complicated sometimes when you have a condition that also there are about 10 million people don't have a birth certificate, for example. So that's a kind of, so I met, for example, Afghan refugees, Saadat, part of the community without any documents.
There's also, because when the Pakistani state, which I would call as kind of becoming like a security state, is trying to deal with the idea of a community or an identity that complicates gender binary, then this idea of citizenship and legible citizens and the way I would say refugee crisis over there is being dealt with, becomes very important. Because let me just, for instance, give an example here that I guess in my own ways, I very much knew that this kind of public surveillance of state surveillance of Palestinian identities is going on in very much specifically in the policies themselves. But I was in a meeting recently, and a little bit of background here. It's very difficult it has now become easier for the community after their protest, but it's still very difficult to have your gender legally recognized in Pakistan because of the kind of policies that have reformed recently, given the kind of anti-terror laws that are being installed, and the kind of surveillance structure that is becoming part of the society, right? So what happens is that when Farzada or transgender people ask that we be recognized, our identities be recognized for what they are, and just that claim is not taken as seriously, right? So there are often attempts to, you can say there are attempts for medical gatekeeping or some kind of bureaucratic hurdles to where the state wants to determine, oh, this is your gender. And the community has been resisting against that for the longest time. There were specifically protests when the Supreme Court tried to do that. There was something similar when the Parliament tried to do it. So and that is happening because of the kind of problems that Pakistan is dealing with in terms of when it tries to deal with terrorism, right, or issue of Afghan refugees. So, for instance, in Karachi, they specifically made policies regarding obtaining your identity card very strict, right, to basically crack down on the refugee population. So in order to get your identity card, you would have to present a family member and some kind of a family history, right? They were even asking for these complicated kind of documents from specifically from certain communities, and the indirect target of that have been transgender people, right, and in Palestinians. So that is precisely because most of the people in the community are abandoned or leave their homes at a very early stage, and also face so much violence from their families. So like if I'm if my father is trying to kill me, how am I gonna like bring him to the registration department to get my ID card made, right? So when I in a meeting, then in a meeting recently with the Punjab government, there was a representative of the registration department, we call it NADRA, there, who was sitting there, and I posed that question to him: why is this process so difficult, right? And he literally admitted from his own mouth that, the policies about your communities are about your community are so lax, and there are some Indian agents who are trying to infiltrate, and there are people, there are terrorists in burqas who are trying to, so specifically, and I have come to, I guess, come into my transness or learned about my gender in a post-Afghan war world, right? In a post-Afghan war Pakistan. And the kind of security measures that have been installed there have made our lives so much more difficult. And somehow there is no recognition of that, right? So that, again, the idea that transgender people are legible or illegible citizens, or the way certain communities are kind of interacting with each other, it's very, very important to understand how rights are being given in our context.
मैं भी वही बात कर रही थी मतलब वही डिस्कस हो रहा था कि जो अभी बात कर रहे थे कि शायद कोई और बंदा ना बनवा ले या तालिबान आईडी कार्ड बनवा ले मगर 2012 में जब प्रोसेस हो रहा था तो मैं प्रेजेंट कर रही थी लाहौर से ना आईडी कार्ड का प्रोसेस जब स्टार्ट हुआ था
Ich wollte auch, I wanted to say the same thing which you were saying about this meeting, and this politician was blaming of people taking up transgender identities to hide their original identities. But in 2012, I was protesting. What was it, 2012 again? Presenting. I was presenting.
जब प्रोसेस स्टार्ट हुआ था पाकिस्तान में पहली दफा पाकिस्तान का कार्ड के ऊपर उनकी आइडेंटिटी लिखी जा रही थी ये 2012 में सबसे पहले उस टाइम प्रेजेंट करी थी मगर उस टाइम नहीं था फिर कुछ दिनों बाद उन्होंने इशू निकालने शुरू कर दिए
In 2012, when they started talking about like recognizing transgender identity in the ID cards, at the beginning it was no problem, but after a while they started making this security issue as a problem, and found more problems while making this policy.
क्योंकि आज से 100 साल पीछे चले जाए तो कुछ लोगों के गुरुओं के नाम के कार्ड होते थे
If we talk about gurus 100 years ago, there were people who had their names on cards. Like gurus had their name on the cards as a parent.
That's a very, very brief comment. Very brief comment. Once again, the way, like I said, you have to present a member of the biological family to get your ID card, right? So the community challenged that in court. So in 2016 and 17, there was a case in Lahore High Court called Neeli versus Federation of Pakistan, in which this precise issue was challenged, that we have been abandoned by our families, we are staying from our families, how can we even obtain our basic document if you're making this process so difficult? So what they did was that they tried to institutionalize the Guru system into the state apparatus, right? So in order for you to get your ID card, for a Pakistan person to get their ID card, they could bring their Guru as well, right? So then they had to register the Gurus, and then that record had to go to the NADRA headquarters in Islamabad, and then basically they were like, what the hell? Because the community system is so fluid, it's and I'm using the word cautiously here, but it's so queer that the state just kind of like, they were baffled, how do we deal with this? Because, these relations are actually very fluid. And this kinship system is kind of always in flux. So when the state tried to regulate it, they were basically, at a loss, right? But once again, it's the community that has to face the brunt of it, the kind of the problems actually then the community has to face, right? But what is also important here is that while they try to come up with a way for Pakistanis to get their ID card without Pakistan commenting this issue of biological family, they still did not recognize the Guru Chila system or Guru Chila system is not the right way to call it, but this alternate Pakistan kinship as a legitimate form of family, right? So once again, Article 6 in our Constitution, I think, says that the privacy home and the marriage, the institution of marriage and family is kind of like is an institution that needs to be protected, right? So, and the way marriage and the way family have been defined by the state are obviously very restrictive. So the Pakistan kinship does not fit into that heterosexual matrix. While they are, giving certain rights to the community, they still refuse to acknowledge this entire system, this entire alternative kinship system, very elaborate kind of kinship system as a legitimate form of family. And it is kind of ironic because the idea of nuclear family that the state has adopted is very recent. I would say, which is in fact actually historically true, that the Pakistan family system or the kinship system is far older than the idea of nuclear family in South Asia. So it's kind of ironic that that is not recognized.
Thank you, Mehlab, for amazing input. Yes. And I guess for all of our audience, it's very clear that just imagine 1 second you go to the notary office in Berlin and ask for this, and what type of violence that you will get just for 1 second. And so I would like to change the focus a little bit toward the work of Aks Film Festival and ask Saadat in particular about the Aks Film Festival and also how this kind of Saadat as a person that is actually living in Copenhagen and create program for this complexity that we saw a little bit of it and reflect on it as being in a kind of diaspora person themselves, how they reflect about this and how work with it and how work with community and yeah, thank you very much.
Sure. So I think I maybe have to go a little bit back into the background of how things started. Being diaspora or being displaced or having this, especially in current Europe, having a migrant background is already very problematic, and you always have to struggle to find yourself like where actually the home is. So back in 2010, 11, I started like being queer, having multiple minority backgrounds. I started like exploring more about how it is to be queer or being alternative in my homelands. And this is where when I met Neeli and many other fantastic people who I like still in touch with, and we worked together. We did this documentary. Neeli allowed me into this wonderful family system. Normally it's quite protected, and but somehow she saw something in me, and I was also welcomed. I lived with them and learned a lot of things from Neeli. And once the film was done and it started like running around the festival, and Neeli came over and there was instant reflection on the film that this kind of education should not be given only here, but also taken back home to the mainstream society in Pakistan. And we should have platforms like film festivals or at least film festivals that can have some sort of political agendas. So this is how we started Aks Festival.
2012.
In 2000, no, we started. Neeli came up with the idea in 2012, and we did not know how to do it, but we were kind of hopeful, and it took us like 2 years to at least start somewhere. And in 2014, we started in a living room, which you actually see there as well. So a little bit of we started this exhibition. So we started this festival in a living room in Lahore, where I was only responsible for the films, and Neeli was responsible to gather people, community, and also people from the mainstream society to come and see us and talk to us. I mean, this is how we started, and since then we are expanding. We are trying to reach out to more cities, and I think since last 2 years we have also started like going more into the public spaces. This is all met in Mehlab. We went to the universities and occupy spaces there and talk about minority rights. We try not to be. Try not to bring something which is kind of alienated ideas. So we try to have more. I wouldn't use the word authentic, but more cultural aspects of and discuss the things which are happening out there. So luckily, when we started Aks Festival, there was also a kind of atmosphere for transgender movement, and which helped us a lot to open the dialogue a bit more, and we could have more focus on trans rights through the festival. So.
Then I don't know. Shall I continue with you a little bit more question and we relate to this topic? And then the idea of being minority here in Europe and working with some other construct of minority somewhere else in Pakistan, you try to and this has its own complexity because I have been to the film festival and I know that for creating a program there you need to have specific films, you need to show it in specific places, you need to make sure that some specific people that normally does not have access to come to some specific venue, they need to come. So how are you going to deal with all this complexity of organizations that you need to do?
Well, I mean, there are always like both pros and cons to when you start something. Say, I mean, the consequences or the difficulties have been so far mostly to avoid any kind of appropriation. I think sometimes it's. I mean, I really have to think while curating the program twice what kind of films can we brought to Pakistan, and also, I mean, are we doing something which is safe for all of us? So that's actually the main idea, and then being maybe outside Pakistan can also benefit a little bit in that sense that there's more access. I mean, visas are the biggest issues for people, so there's more access for me to get into the or bring film from international cinema to Pakistan. Which sometimes is slightly difficult when you are living in a place where you have to go through a lot of things.
Thank you. And somehow I have more questions, but now they're getting long, and I think that we should lighten up the meeting. I would, if you people don't want to add something specifically in this moment, I would like to ask audience to ask questions. Is that something?
I mean, just kind of like reflecting a bit on, what Saadat was saying that, I mean, I guess you keep on hearing the word safety, so I guess what I would like you all to take away from this is how specifically trans communities kind of deal with the idea of safety, right? Because on one hand, by what I told you, how the idea of safety is weaponized by the state to deny certain rights to communities, and then on the other hand, you have, I mean, it's not something specific to the West, but because something like that is also happening in Pakistan, but how the idea of safety is weaponized, like in feminist context, to exclude trans people, trans women specifically, and also how as people who occupy spaces that are kind of like at the margins and also at multiple margins, at the intersection of multiple margins, the idea of safety itself is very complicated and especially ever since I've come here to talk about what is happening in Pakistan, and I specifically avoided talking about the kind of issues we have in the sense of because there's always this expectation to sell our pain to the right audiences, but there is this when we not just over there but also here, this kind of transnational kind of framework that we're working in. The idea of safety itself is something that is very regularly weaponized against us, and we are constantly seen as suspicious, as potentially dangerous or even dangerous, right? So that's something that I would like you all to kind of reflect on, and how you can, through your own work or through your everyday lives, kind of make things easier for us as allies, right? There's that. And any questions from you guys? That would be great.
I would like to take questions now.
Wow, you?
There's one question.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question on something you touched on, and it's for everyone. Just the complexities of coming to kind of white European countries, and expressing your realities, and how that is the complexities of that.
Can I translate?
Yes.
मेरे लिए तो यही मुश्किल है कि मेरे लिए ये आसान है कि मैं अपनी ज़बान में तो सही तरह बात कर सकती हूँ। मेरे लिए मुश्किल कि जब हम बात कर रहे होते हैं तो आपको ट्रांसलेशन तो वो बात बीच में कई दफ़ा दूसरी साइड पे चली जाती है।
For me, it's a problem that when I come here, that I can talk very well in my language, but if someone has to translate, then the things which I want to say are not delivered properly, and the topic changes through this translation. So that's the most difficulty.
और ये भी एक अच्छी बात है कि हम बात कर रहे हैं तो अब कुछ हमारी कम्युनिटीज जो खुद आके बात करें। पहले बहुत सारे ऐसे लोग थे दुकानदार जो खुद बात करते थे, वो हमारी बात करते थे कि वो हमारे बड़े बुरे तरीके बैड तरीके से वो दिखा रहे थे एनजीओ सेंटर्स के लोग।
Before it was like that more okay, I would translate it to the English, kind of like people who were were running NGOs in Pakistan, who were educated from higher class. They would come here to West and talk about us. But now, recently, that's something very good which is happening, that we are able to come here ourselves and talk about our problems. And they're called Dukandar, shopkeepers in the slang.
In Pakistan, आदमी था ना, वो तो फेमिनिज्म था ना, वो किसी कम्युनिटी से था। वो ट्रांसजेंडर कम्युनिटी को प्रेजेंट करने के लिए 20 साल जाता रहा। मुझे थोड़ी देर अभी पता चला कि वो इंटरनेशनल सतह पर कहीं ना कहीं कम्युनिटी को प्रेजेंट कर रहा था। तो कम्युनिटी मेंबर्स
There's a rather like a gay person who was going in international community for 20 years and talking about transgender people, and she just got to know about it a little while ago. So he was someone from a richer family, and she just got to know that he was talking about transgender community in West for a long time.
एक इंसान है वो हमें रहता ही नहीं है, वो हमने से है ही नहीं है। वो हमारी तकलीफ या कोई हमारी अच्छी चीज़ कैसे बयान कर सकता है?
There is someone who has never lived with us, who has never faced the same problems we have, who have never felt the same things we go through. How could they just go anywhere and talk about us or represent us?
Just a very quick comment about the language. I'm very proud that you are the only person in this panel talking non-colonial language.
अंग्रेजी बोल रहे हैं non-colonial ज़बान नहीं बोल रही हैं, अपनी ज़बान बोल रही हैं.
I mean, complexities from my side. I think, yeah, I mean, back in 2010, when I actually went to Pakistan on my own for the first time, I really had to deconstruct my ideas of alternativeness. I mean, I only learned about LGBT, which is a very, very Western ideology or Western phenomenon. And I embraced something new. I learned a lot new. It's beyond being LGBT. It's like, it's a whole new thing. It was new only thing for me, but that had been part of my culture for so many years. I mean, even before LGBT was even invented. So I think that's actually the kind of complexity I face every time when we do Aks Festival in Europe or elsewhere. That I really have to kind of do the baseline kind of lecture for the audiences to tell them, like, remove your LGBT ideas and listen to something which actually existed before that. So I think that's actually more or less a complexity I face.
Just building on what Neeli was saying, I think from what I was saying at the very beginning, the idea was to say that translation itself is a violent process. It's a process of erasure in a lot of ways, and it is specifically erasure for us because when the British colonizers came to South Asia, and they tried to codify laws, because obviously, like, we exist as a very diverse kind of society, or before that in pre-colonial times, and there were different polities, but there was not a single uniform system of law. So what they did was, and I kind of briefly talked about it earlier at a different occasion, was that they tried to translate certain local books on law and jurisprudence from different religious communities in order to codify them into the British legal system that they were trying to install there, which we're still dealing with today. And in that very process of translation, that very violent process of translation, they specifically erase certain things. And that is how the kind of that process of marginalization, you can say, started in a way, right? So, for instance, translating hijras as hermaphrodites, or using that kind of language in the law, or at certain points, kind of just skipping the word completely, right? That was a very kind of like a thing that happened during that time. And now, while we are dealing with what cultural activism is kind of a struggle where the community is trying to reclaim or claim certain rights from the society, from the state, but also dealing with the very violent process of NGOization that we're dealing with over there, right? Because NGOs are the way that the global north kind of communicates with us, right? So while there is this process of translation happening in terms of rights, in terms of identities, it's also happening in terms of in the way the community is being seen and being affected. I guess that's the way to put it. So, like, when there's translation happening, so you need a translator, right? You need somebody to mediate, right? So what the people sitting here, with the also white money, pink money, who are trying to save us from ourselves, What they do is they look for certain mediators who speak their language. People like me, I guess. Yeah. I've been trying desperately hard to avoid that. So, but what has happened is that that very process of what is called activism in Pakistan is very much like conflated with NGOization. Those mediators who talk to the people here on our behalf, they are educated gay men who have basically been cashing on the whole idea of transgender rights for quite some time. What Neeli is describing, what Neeli is saying, has literally been her experience in terms of how that process of NGOization, that process of imposing a certain form of activism on the community has reinforced class hierarchies, caste hierarchies, and a lot of other forms of violence. So while Neeli, who has been working for 20 years, has been organizing the community, doing all that kind of work, but then suddenly somebody comes in and
जी याद आ गया काम हम लोग करते रहे कि मतलब वायलेंस के ऊपर केस हैंडल करते रहे कुछ लोग थे अदालतों के वो अपने कागजों के ऊपर लिख के रहे कि हम काम करवा रहे हैं
So like Neeli was the one who was dealing with actual violence cases on the ground, but some people basically would use that and put that in their documents to get more funding for themselves, right? So what you see right now is that the community, most of the working class Palestinian communities are getting even more marginalized, but there are certain people in the community, within the community and people who I guess would don't specifically occupy transidentities but claim to be talking on their behalf, tend to get more empowered. And I mean, this is the kind of violence that we're dealing with on a very daily basis with these middlemen, because I mean, there's for instance somebody in Peshawar, and it's a very sexy topic for white people because Taliban conservative city, let's send more money there just to save trans people, and especially because the media has been kind of reporting.
Peshawar में वो कोई मर्डर ना हो तो वो स्पारियां देके करवाना शुरू कर देते हैं ट्रांसजेंडर।
So like even if there's not been a murder, they try to.
Peshawar में वो एक अदारा है।
They try to manufacture cases of murder, right? So but for instance, and I specifically want to give this example, is that when we were working on the transgender protection bill, there were lots of NGOs were claiming lots of funding from here, saying that, oh, we're working on the bill. But what they did was, they were actually trying to sabotage the bill, because once, even if there's like a little bit recognition of certain rights, they have basically lost their ground for asking for more money, right? So they present themselves as our saviors to the white saviors, and basically what they're trying to do is they are again like the kind of tactics that they've been using, like personal like death threats and all that kind of stuff, and literally paying people off just to kind of like, so basically again the kind of divide and rule that we dealt with in colonial times is basically what we're dealing with in terms of NGOization. And this is exactly what happens when we come here in these spaces and talk about our issues, because again, like I said, there is this expectation from us to what Neeli calls Rana, like that we cry about our pain and we're so oppressed and all that, and somehow that kind of that pain is basically consumed like some item, and because again, like, it's not the people who have to deal with it, it's not the people here who have to deal with it, it's us who have to live our lives a certain way. And then, once again, the kind of framework that we exist in, somehow the generous help that white people try to provide to us actually never reaches us. So, yeah, I mean, that's what comes out of talking
And
But
what
also that's something, sorry, something that the community you speak about is enabling and disabling at the same time for you, for the Pakistan community, and it's not something that people have immediate understanding and access to here. So it is quite a phenomenon, the fact that the community and the family system, the khandan jo hote hain, they've existed for a long time. So in some ways, I mean, I'm an artist when I live here, and this question again comes up, the need to translate. Actually, at the end of the day, there isn't, one can't always get help, and one can't always communicate. It is an issue within ourselves and our communities. It is just a matter of sharing. That is. I think that in some ways, this is a forum for sharing. A lot of help and what is these politics of helping and how can we help you? It's just an exchange of a community that is existing with all its complexity, which is foreign to a community.
Absolutely. What do you mean by access?
Access to
access
to the complexity of a chela guru, the ideas.
Is it necessary?
No, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it is.
Right.
I don't think it happens that easily.
Right.
And sometimes it is not comprehended, things are not translated, but they can be sensed at best. And that's it.
Yeah.
Can we ask you to say it in Urdu to her, because I'm also listening to last year.
Not enough wine. नहीं वो ये कह रही है, उनका कहने का मकसद ये है कि ऐसे फॉरम्स में जब हम बाहर आकर अपने कल्चर की बात करते हैं तो उसका तर्जुमा करना नामुमकिन है। मतलब जो आपका एक्सपीरियंस है, जो आपकी ज़िंदगी है, तो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा जो हम कर सकते हैं ऐसे माहौल में वो एक शेयरिंग है। बस आपने अपनी कहानी सुनाई, एक किस्म का इंटरफेस है, यानी कि आमना सामना है। उससे ज़्यादा कम्युनिकेशन मुश्किल है, क्योंकि सिर्फ ज़बान का मसला नहीं है, सिर्फ अंग्रेज़ी से उर्दू नहीं है, वो कल्चर है जो ट्रांसलेट नहीं हो सकता, जो आपकी ज़िंदगी का तजुर्बा है वो ट्रांसलेट नहीं हो सकता। तो इनका कहने का मकसद ये है कि ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा जो हम कर सकते हैं वो ना हम किसी से मदद मांग रहे हैं, ना हम कह रहे हैं कि आके हम हमारी ज़िंदगी को समझो, हमारे गम को समझो, हम सिर्फ शेयर कर रहे हैं। ये बस इनका मकसद।
और ये भी कि आप लोगों की कम्युनिटी जो है, ये खानदान जो है, फारजादा की कम्युनिटी जो है, जो 100 साल से चला आ रहा है,
100 साल से
हजारों साल से चला आ रहा है,
जब से
कल्चर, something which is the cultural part of which is South Asian culture, उसमें एक खास बात भी है और प्रॉब्लम्स भी हैं और खास बात भी है जो यहाँ शायद ना हो। तो इट्स ऑल्सो एक बहुत ही खास कल्चर और हिस्ट्री शेयर कर रहे हैं जो यहाँ के लोगों के लिए बहुत नई चीज़ है। यहाँ का फैमिली सेटअप और सोशल सेटअप बिल्कुल मुख्तलिफ है, जहाँ शायद लोगों को कभी मिला ना हो ये सपोर्ट। तो एक खास तरह तो आप लोगों को सपोर्ट भी मिल रही है।
अच्छा, बात ये है कि वो चेन या वो कल्चर खुद कम्युनिटी ने मजबूत किया है उसको। अपनी अगर वो कम्युनिटी की पकड़ है, अगर वो जिस तरह से हम लोग यहाँ पे देखते हैं सिस्टम नहीं है तो मजबूती भी नहीं है उसमें। और वो खास बात कम्युनिटी का एक वो है, एक तो रिश्ता मजबूत है, एक सिस्टम मजबूत है, जहाँ पे मतलब
Okay, so I will try in my colonial language skills. The community we have, we made it strong ourselves. The community has made the system strong themselves. If there is this no community, then also there is no strength existing here. Was it that?
Again, sharing once again is never like an analytical process, right? So the kind of sharing we do here is also has a lot of particular meanings, right?
और कम्युनिटी का मतलब वो मसले मसाइल कब से स्ट्रगल स्टार्ट हुआ है, अब आके चीजें बदलनी शुरू हुई, बहुत लॉन्ग टाइम।
It's been a very long struggle and based on the culture of the community that we've been able to get the rights we want. But again, this is a question that I'm posing generally because something that I'm thinking about is that yes, we cannot translate certain things and we cannot capture the complexity of our culture in terms when we're trying to communicate across certain borders and boundaries. Once again, another example that so when we were working on the bill, and again this goes to the idea of family or culture and how it is presented, right? So the way Pakistan community has been presented is once again extremely exotified, or even when it is talked about these cultures, these visuals, when they're talked about, is extremely in that reductionist and exotifying kind of way, right? But look at what, and when it happens, so once again, when we're not talking about it, and the people, हाँ मैं ये खत्म करूँगी आप काफी करेंगे ठीक है तो when we're not the ones who are saying things on our own terms, then there are other people who are doing that, right? So when we were working on the bill, and the NGOs were basically getting a lot of money to push for criminalization or further regulation and control of the Gurjula system. And it goes to what you were saying about how there are good things and there are bad things about the Gurjula system, right? And what I'm saying is that specific idea was weaponized during this legislative process by these really privileged development workers, because they compared, for instance, the Gurjula system to slavery, to human, and then try to regulate it through legal frameworks of human trafficking, and again, a language that actually has a lot of currency in the NGO sector, right? So, and then once again, they try to impose this very Western understanding of Gurjula system, right? This is not a family. This is just something really bad, right? So, what was happening there was that is actually a very very middle class, even upper class understanding of Palestinian culture, right? So people do tend to see Palestinian customs and Palestinian rituals as savage, as low class, as something bad and loud and
Gaudy or whatever.
Yes, exactly. And they use that very particular idea because they literally sold it over here in their proposals to try and stigmatize that very system and further regulate it within the law by using a language of human rights, right? So again, there's that.
I want to add something about mind. So I just want to also show, because Mehlab were talking about consumption. If you walk this museum, when you go inside of the museum, the first exhibition, I'm very ashamed of it, because I'm a first student of this place. And when you enter here, you see this wall about consumption of pain of people from other parts of the world, how many people are killed without any context, without any reason, and without any kind of really reflecting on the type of violence that is reproduced. And then we have guests from all over the world here in the museum, and we just present in this museum that the savage idea that the other people are not okay. And so this one point that I wanted to say, this is here for consumption, people pay €4 to enter. And the other things that I wanted to also point out, because the question was about dealing with the whiteness also, is also this process of NGOization is not only for brown and black places. Here also, as an activist, as a person who worked here in Berlin, as a person that organized with lots of close people to me, part of the community, try to organize many things, we always receive lots of NGO violence also. So this last week we did the Transformation Festival, which is a kind of a community-based festival, and we get €3,000 for an NGO, and this NGO asked us to have 7 logo in our festival. Seven logo of exactly 7 logo of ministries for €3,000. And it's actually a problem within our community, because people doesn't know that we get only €3,000. So people start saying, oh, Ministry of Family gives you budget. Then you need to also support us. What type of community member are you? So this is the same divide and rule that other people feel, but just happened last week here in Berlin. So I just wanted also give this dealing with this situation that is also not only about different places. It's also happening here in this room, because this room is also organized by NGO style, and every one of us knows what's going on 2 months ago about election of the new board member in Shulas Museum, and the story you can read it also in everywhere. So I would like to wrap up this thing, and then we can have an informal conversation after this, and I hope you have a nice informal conversation afterward. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I would just like to express towards the museum, transformation, good institute, and all of the speakers from Pakistan, Munir, coming on my call, and all of you for coming here tonight. Thank you so very much.